Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely excited to be here this evening. Because I can see a lot of friends here, some co-mates, colleagues, senior colleagues, general leader, and so many others. In addition to our co-mate, GD Bakshi, who asked me to come for this book launch event, and I couldn't say no, because these army guys are very tough, and you have to listen to them. And as you can see, he has a very loud voice, very passionate about what he says, what he does. And people know him not only on this side of the border, but on the other side as well. And I would like to congratulate him for this wonderful work that he's done in outlining as to what happened in Op Sindoor. Because as he says, it's an open, it's like a disclaimer. It's like the open news or open sources. Because once you retire, everything is open sources. But I would like you all to join me in congratulating him with a big round of applause for this effort that he's done. Surprisingly, and I must share this story, a lot of work has been done after Op Sindoor in terms of the written word and the spoken word. A lot of articles, books have been written. And the very first that I read was sometime in August. Op Sindoor actually concluded the actual operations in May, and this was in August itself. There was a very important, a well-known publication. I don't want to mention the names. It was a compilation of all the essays as to what actually happened. And you'll not believe it that a 190-page document had not a single word on the Indian Air Force or what it had done in the operations. And I'm so glad that GD has set the record straight in what you heard today and what he's written. So I'm not going to talk about actually what happened there and what did not happen. I'll just cast my views a little differently as how I see it and how as things unfolded. Firstly, Pakistan has made a very serious misreading of India's intentions. If you look back, I'm speaking, let's say, looking at the issues from the Pakistani side, is that they did some serious miscalculation because of the political churn that has taken place in Pakistan post Imran Khan, when Asif Munir came to power, or resumed power in that sense with the new government. Because if you see in 2016, we had this special forces which GD spoke about. It was a single service operation across the line of control. 2019, we had the Balakot strikes by the Air Force, a very short operation. Both sides claimed some kind of a victory. So Pakistan should have actually realized that if it continued in the same path, that India would respond. And India did respond, as we all know, dramatically. So there was a kind of a first to many events that happened in Op Sindoor. It was the first time that you had two nuclear states using offensive weapons, more so from our side, in precision strikes across deep into Pakistan, not only just LOC, but also across the IB sector itself. A lot of drones were used offensively. We had a very robust air defense, which neutralized most of their penetrative strikes. And like I said, for the first time that you had two nuclear states in this state of a conflict. But from our point of view, for the first time we had some kind of a total doctrinal clarity. And that doctrinal clarity actually came from the Prime Minister himself, because that was the underpinning for the three principles, and that has actually defined our way going forward. And those three principles, as you know, the first one, of course, was India will respond with a lot of resolution to any terrorist attack. The second was that India will not be blackmailed or intimidated by the nuclear bogey. And the third, of course, was that India will not make any distinction between the terrorists and their supporters or the states supporting terrorist attack. So this actually was the strategic clarity and a big strategic shift from what had been happening earlier. And which GD also referred to it briefly thereafter. And I can also tell you, personal knowledge is the fact that full control was given to the armed forces, the CDS and the chiefs, to plan, to execute. So there was a lot of joint planning, integrated planning, along with CDS, the chiefs, the NSA and the other agencies, who sat down and used those 2 weeks for very integrated planning and a decentralized execution from the operational units. So that exactly was the setup as to how Ops Sindhu took place. And also for the first time, the assumptions that were guiding Pakistan all along had been challenged and the myth had been exploded, and I'll explain how. GD referred to it in his talk briefly, was that they had been troubling us at the sub-conventional or the hybrid level conflicts at a very low level. That we will do terrorist attacks, we will bleed you with 1,000 cuts, that philosophy. And India will not escalate to the conventional level because of the nuclear overhang, and therefore they would threaten us with the tactical nuclear weapons and so on and so forth. All that is now behind us. For the simple reason that Ops Sindhu has actually proven that irrespective of whether it is at the sub-conventional level, we are going to respond. And then we would decide the scale, the intensity of the operations. And that's exactly what we actually achieved. So So in 2019, when we did the Balakot strike, there was some kind of a deterrence established at that point of time. And why I say so is because it had bought us 6 years of peace. And in between, we also had the abrogation of Article 370 in J&K. But then again, now with this event, the deterrence actually had broken down. And the intention was to re-establish those principles once again, and to impose on Pakistan the fact that if you mess around, then the cost is going to be very, very heavy. But then, is the deterrent just enough? Is it just enough that we have this kind of a scenario? And as GD, if you go through his book, he also talks about that time has come for us to use coercion, and we have to use a compellence kind of a strategy. Now, compellence actually is a very high-end state where you change the behavior of a state. And I think he uses this term, he didn't mention it today, so kutte ki dung tedi rehti hai, no, that kind of thing. Am I right, sir? Actually, we've always had boxers, the dogs, in our home. And we also have a bulldog, whose tails have actually been cut, so I don't understand this. So the simple solution is to cut the tail instead of trying to straighten it. But on a serious note, if we have to move to a compelling strategy where we try and change his behavior, then the pain and punishment has to be so strong, has to be at such a high degree that he does not even think of those, to go into those areas. Now, to achieve that state, especially a nuclear state, we're not talking about just any small power, we're talking about a nuclear state, you would require a very high level of technological asymmetry, you would require a very high level of offensive power capability, and force levels do not matter here, especially if the duration of the conflict is short, as it was in this case, just about 90 hours and less. I would put an outside window of about 5 days is what you should have with you to settle any of these high intensity conflicts before a lot of other factors come into play. Because the moment you use this tremendous asymmetry, and even if you develop it and have those capabilities, to apply it, you perhaps cross some of the red lines, triggering a kind of you start getting into those danger areas. And therefore, it's not just kinetic action. You would have to perhaps use some of the other instruments available to you, which India did in the form of suspension of the Indus Water Treaty, and maybe some political pressure points, which I don't believe we have at this point of time, especially with the relations and what is actually happening in the region, and also the economic side. So the economic pains is what actually would hurt them a lot. And that is why, if you see, after the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty, is when Asif Munir has actually gone rabid. You know, because if they talk of J&K as the jugular vein, they talk of the Indus Water Treaty as the life and death issues. And I think the writing on the wall is coming up in this summertime when there'll be a shortage of water. It's not that we are going to hold back water, but it has tremendous psychological impact. So that kind of approach, combined with punitive action from the armed forces, is actually going to be the template, hopefully, in case we move on to the next round. And if for a moment, if you see, the pressure and the pain points on Pakistan actually would have been far worse. Just try and imagine a scenario where it does not receive the kind of support from the US as what it is receiving now, especially after Sintur, when the entire dynamics has changed in terms of US-Pakistan relations. Just try and think that if Pakistan was in the same state as during the Biden administration, it was nowhere. Its economy in tatters, it was almost like an outlier. It had just come out of the financial task force sanctions, and it would have remained so. And if Op Sindoor had taken place at that time, you can imagine where Pakistan would be today. So if, when we go forward, you find that this is the scenario, then to my mind, this Indus Water Treaty combined with punitive threat of action by the offensive action by the armed forces would actually make Pakistan rethink before they try anything differently the next time. And so the first time, again, you realize that our terms of reference and our terms of engagement with Pakistan has changed. What we're going to dialogue, what are we going to talk about? Because I'm quite sure that we will renegotiate the Indus Water Treaty on our terms this time. J&K is no longer for any discussions. We will rediscuss the Indus Water Treaty first. And that is actually the pressure points that we have in our hands. So like I said, the terms of engagement, the terms of reference for our next dialogue, if at all, whenever it takes place, would occupy a very important place, should occupy a very important place. There has been some talk of escalatory control, escalation and so on and so forth. And I would like to just highlight a few points here, because GD also mentioned that the Air Force or the air power is a very important instrument for application. And a lot of people think that air power is very escalatory. It escalates very, very fast and things can get out of hand. Actually, they are right to a certain extent, because if it is put in the wrong hands, if it's employed incorrectly or applied not professionally, then it's a blunt instrument. It can create havoc. But if it is in the right hands by professionals, by people and specialized people who deal with it, then need not be escalatory. And I'll take you out for digress a little bit on this issue, because it's a very important issue to understand. And to keep this escalation under control, like in this case in Ops Sindhu, the targeting was a very, very important part. What you target, where you target, and how you do that. Let me also tell you that this requires a lifetime of science. Even people in my service, they spend their entire lifetime and they still sometimes don't get it. It's not just a science, it's a very fine art to perfect. When there's a pressure of time, how you do targeting, how you control the targeting. And I'll give you a very small example. The strike that you saw at that base Sargoda, which did not somehow make too much of news, but I'll try and explain why and how it was so important in the overall context. Sargoda incidentally is one of the largest bases in Pakistan. It's in the heart of Punjab. It's not the largest base. The largest base is in Karachi, Moripur, in terms of area, size, and so on and so forth. But Punjab matters a lot to the Pakistani mindset. So this happens to be in the heart of Punjab. It used to be a very old British base. It has 2 runways. The Central Air Command headquarters are there. It has almost 4 to 5 squadrons, fighter squadrons at any point of time. And it also has the Combat Commanders School, CCS, where the elite, it's called the elitist base because the cream of the Pakistani Air Force is trained there. And the future commanders all come from, they would have done a tenure at least from Sargoda. And 2003, the name of the base was changed to Mushaf Air Base, because it was named after their Air Chief Marshal Mushaf Ali Mir, who died in an aircraft accident in 2005 in Kohat. So this name was based after him. Now it is known as Mushaf. And so you can see for yourself, we could have taken out any of these targets. Yeah. There are hundreds of aircraft shelters, there are command and control setup, fuel dumps, weapon dumps, air traffic control, the CCS, where it is located, everything is known, everything is available. The CCS incidentally was very much in our crosshairs, because if we had taken it out, and if those people were there, then we could have perhaps taken out the cream of the Pakistani Air Force there in that strike itself. But we didn't do that. We hit the 2 runways. They have 2 runways, cross runways, 0624 and 1432. Those 2 large craters that GD spoke about. And the professionals in the Pakistani Air Force will understand when I'm talking like this, if they hear this, that when your adversary has put 2 big craters on your runways in broad daylight at 9:30 in the morning, in full view of the world, whereas he could have taken out anything else on your base, actually it tells you a message. I've got your front covered, I've got your backyard covered. The rest actually will be history if you don't stop. And this strike actually, to my mind, was similar to the strike that the Air Force had done, the Dhaka strike at the governor's house, where the governor then ran to surrender. And it was only after this particular thing that they realized that if they don't ask for cessation of hostilities through the DGMO channel, the damage would be far, far more. So this is my analysis of how exactly they got so rattled that, and as I mentioned to you, the whole thing was available to us. Everything was there in our sights. We could have done all that as well. But that is how you control escalation. That is how you do the targeting. So if somebody tells you that I can hit your front yard and your backyard and everything else is within our range and you can't do anything about it, that's time he puts his hands up and says, all right, I think we've had enough. So, so that's a very important part which I thought I'd share with you. When we look at going forward, and which GT's mentioned in his book in the form of an epilogue, a lot of lessons have emerged, and I'm quite sure that we would have taken care of in terms of our capabilities, whatever the shortfalls were, and those issues would have been addressed or are being addressed same time. But at a larger context, moving away from the operational side, at the larger context, I do hear a lot of chatter on certain aspects which I thought I'll just share with you. One of them, of course, is to do with what is actually happening in the region, what's happening in Bangladesh, what's happening in Nepal, how Pakistan has suddenly now become central to the US frame of references in the Middle East, how it's going to utilize its role there, how emboldened Pakistan would now become in the region. And therefore, the way I see it, this is not the time to tinker around with anything else in terms of structures, in terms of whatever else we're doing. And because I do hear in the media and also some people talking about suddenly this issue of theater command has come out. And the way it strikes me is that we must get back to more and more joint effort, more and more integration at all levels. And let's keep whatever is going good for us at all levels. Because as we go along, even the Prime Minister and the Raksha Mantri in the last Commanders Conference, Combined Commanders Conference, and at a seminar, the RM also spoke. They spoke a lot about jointness. They spoke a lot about integrating the capabilities of the three services. They never spoke anything else about structures. So let's leave that. And I think that as we go along, the more we integrate, a time will emerge in our Indian history and as we evolve, that we ourselves will find the best way forward as to how we need to proceed, what else we need to do. So right now we're at a stage where we need to do a fair amount of integration with many other agencies plugged into the system. And the Air Chief, the present Air Chief, has also spoken about a centralized body in Delhi itself who would get all these inputs of the cyber inputs, the space inputs, the special operations who are specialists in this kind of a role. And all these inputs would be necessary to be integrated as we move along. So don't touch anything else. Focus here itself. The next round, whenever it happens, like I said, Ops Sindoor is presently continuing. But as I can see it, Asif Munir and his regime, for the first time, have felt really threatened, because their power base has got a little destabilized, and especially so with this Indus Water Treaty coming in. And we have to be extremely careful that the next time it may not be through that, the standard template of a terrorist attack. It could very well happen through a false flag operation probably. We don't know where. We Bangladesh, we Nepal, we from the seaward side. We have to keep our guard up and be absolutely prepared. Because next time we will not get the warning signal and preparation time for 2 weeks, as we did this time. So we have to be prepared to take on maybe within 48 hours notice. Maybe 48 hours, 54, 96 hours, 3-4 days, we have to be absolutely ready to be prepared for whatever we have to do from in-situ, because the next time the escalation is going to be very rapid, things and the time compression will take place in a very fast way. The last thing that I just want to mention, GD briefly mentioned that why we stopped at a certain point. And I think, well, again, we are both open source, so I will not go into anything else. And I'm sure in due course of time, these issues will also be discussed. The template that I would use is that you put that man in your shoes, that you are in this position today. What would he have done? Would he have stopped or would he have continued? And I leave the answer to you, because if he had stopped, well, he thinks like us. If he had continued, then we know that Punjabi mindset is at work. So I leave that question mark for you to figure out. But yes, I'm quite sure there are many other factors, and the powers that be who decided that it should stop would have known better than all of us. I'll give them the due and the credit. But certainly, I do know that there was a lot of things in the pipeline if they had not stopped. And I will leave it at that. And the last part is, ladies and gentlemen, we have to understand, when I see this wonderful society like this, who are so open-minded and so nice, and I'm quite sure the Pakistani civil society is also something similar. But to a point, while we are focusing on our way of life, our open style of functioning, discussion, the way we dress, the way we conduct ourselves, our children and our friends and families, I don't want to be sounding like Asif Munir. Many of them are like us. Those who have dealt with Pakistanis, Mr. Rawat was there, he'll bear me out. Many of them are like us. But there are certain elements, and which is a majority on the defense establishment, the army, and so on and so forth. Their whole purpose is the destruction of India. They work 24/7. We may think of those issues maybe 1 hour a day, but they think 24/7. And I think for us to respond and fashion our responses in that way, we have to be ruthless in our thinking, which we are not. We have to change our mindsets. I'm not saying we become hardcore, rabid, anti-so-and-so, but when it comes to matters of security, when it comes to matters of national interest, we have to be ruthless in our thinking, in our application. And this will take time. It's a very departure from our normal civil society and how we think and evolve. But to those elements, they deserve our verse. Thank you.